long-awaited Dead Island 2 is finally upon us, and with it comes a soon-to-be-celebrated flesh system. The new dismemberment tech developed by Dambuster specifically for Dead Island 2. We sat down with the talented developers to find out everything we could about how this system works. But before we do that, there's one simple question. Can they remember what flesh stands for?
Oh yeah.
Oh, let me think.
Easy.
Yeah, so the acronym is...
So it's fully No, it's a fully locational.
Fully locational.
Evisceration system for humanoids.
Evisceration system for humanoids.
Fully locational evisceration system for humanoids, which is the worst I've ever said that, so there you go.
So that's the clever acronym, but what does that actually mean?
Fully locational. That means when you hit a zombie, it is at the point of impact. It's with the direction of impact. That's what you see on the zombie.
When you do, it eats through like first the skin layer, and then we've got like this fatty layer, and then some muscle, and then all the way through to the bones and the internal organs.
It's cutting the zombie, it's destroying the organs, it's chopping them apart.
It really enables you to break down a character from like a fully normal looking zombie all the way down to like their component parts, basically. It's pretty extreme, I guess.
This is Concept to Controller, and a look at how Dead Island 2's impressive flesh system was created. As with any new tech, it always starts with something simple, an idea.
We knew we were making a zombie game. We knew we wanted to dismember zombies, and I think we knew from the outset that if we could nail that, there was so much we could build on.
We wanted to make the system really responsive and allow you to see exactly what you were doing, and every hit should have some feedback, basically.
The very first part where I was involved with Flesh and with the Gore was we had a meeting booked quite early on about how are we going to dismember zombies? What can we do?
We'd been doing some experiments with what would become the Flesh system later, and we were finding that we could be very, very precise. People were expecting something more like what you've seen in other games previously, where you've got like a fixed dismemberment point at the elbow and a fixed dismemberment point at the shoulder or whatever.
We can do something else here. We've got some ideas. We've got some ideas for a much more dynamic procedural system. When we took that into this meeting, all this agenda about, how do we chop up the zombie? How do we use these classical techniques for the dismemberment and the gore? Just sort of had to go in the bin.
That just kind of, I think, changed how everyone felt about what we were going to be able to do with the system. I really love old kind of practical effects horror stuff. And so I was just like, this is a dream come true. So straight away I was like, right, well, the lighting and stuff, we can think about that later. Let's focus on the gore.
Okay, where do we stop? How far can we take it?
With an ambition and an idea solidified, the development team began work on the bare bones of the system, and it wasn't long before a prototype began to take shape.
When we started, we had, the procedural wounds were there, and they were all based on this deforming inwards. We had this, what we called a meat man. So it's sort of like the skeleton with a bit of connective tissue.
Essentially a texture that you could write to on it, which was just like, here is some damage, basically.
Really early on, it was like smiley faces on the zombies, and one of the demos, I was like, right, show this off for an internal video. I'll get the Dambuster logo and I'll just imprint it into the zombie.
You could deform the character so that the skin would sort of get pushed inward, so you'd get this kind of bloody ring with like a deformed piece, and then inside that character we had like a kind of meaty looking skeleton, and that was basically it. We just felt like that wasn't enough, and that's when we came up with this idea of having the outer model almost like a shell, so we called it the Kinder Egg Man.
You know how you have those chocolate surprise eggs with a toy? Well, it's got one layer on the outside that's milk chocolate. It's got one layer on the inside that's white chocolate. It's sort of that, but with meat. So you've got the zombie with the outer layer, and then it's got this folded in layer. And coming up with that idea, that would mean we could poke a hole through a zombie, but you wouldn't see that it was like a thin shell. It suddenly had this thickness to it.
Our earlier system, it didn't really have any volume to the outer layer. So it was just an outer layer, there was an inner layer. You deformed the outer layer, then you saw the inner layer, that was it. When we moved over to this kind of Kinder Egg model, the outer layer had thickness, and then inside that, there was all the bones and internal organs.
And that's where we came up with the whole, we can have an animation where someone punches a fist straight through a zombie's face.
The Kinder Egg Man established the rules of the system, and this triggered a spiral of ideas and opportunities for all sorts of grotesque chaos.
It became a bit of a snowball, really, and you sort of realised we can do so much more with this. Really go to town with the anatomy of the zombies and the organs and, you know, the melting of the zombies.
When we first started working on the game, I was referencing all of these movies, and one of those was RoboCop and The Incredible Melting Man as well, and Street Trash. There were all these movies which had like these cool melting effects, and it was something that I'd never seen in a computer game before. And so one of the things that we really wanted to achieve with the flesh system was damage that could happen over time.
You get to see it literally like melt through all those layers of sort of flesh and tissue and almost down to the skeleton.
It was something that we aimed for, but once we got it working, then we were like, oh, this is really cool, and now we can like have, you know, barrels of acid you can throw on them and all this stuff to really show it off.
It definitely snowballed into something incredible from that point on.
With an impressive system in place, other departments began to take notice. Next on the list was reanimating the Kinder Egg Man with the full zombie treatment.
I remember, like, right at the beginning, he was showing me how we could use blending meshes to create holes in flesh. It was quite a rudimentary prototype at the time, but that was something I'd never seen done before. As a character artist, traditionally you set out to model and texture a character, and it's one thing, it's one piece of art. But when it's destructible, you need to be thinking about how the player is going to interact with it and what you see on the inside when you start breaking the asset down.
With the flesh system, we've sort of had to say to them all the things about how you make characters. You sort of have to do some extra stuff as well. You have to sort of prepare these zombies in a way where it's really sympathetic to the flesh system.
Striking the tone of not making it too disgusting was quite a difficult one, but also we want to make it super gory, so it needed to be over the top. It didn't want to be horrific at any point. We looked at some pretty gross stuff, I won't lie. We have used like anatomical skeleton data. Obviously there's a lot of information available about the organs in a human body, so we can model and texture that stuff quite accurately to be lifelike. One of our strong things that we have with the zombies is that all of the characters in the game are based on scans of people's faces. People we know, like models and actors we've sourced. And when you've got that very lifelike reference material and starting point, you can start applying the zombie treatment, and it always maintains that element of humanity because it came from something real.
The zombies were now taking shape, inside and out. But as slick as they were constructed, it was time to creatively break them to pieces.
As people came along with cool ideas of new ways we could eviscerate characters, that sort of led us to explore, well, how can we create looks and outfits and configurations of bodies around these things?
They have this system, call it the splatter editor in the engine, where they can place wounds and move them around. You know, if I was messing with that, I'd go, oh, put one there, put one there. And they come out with these zombies that's just like, oh, that really looks like there's like a story in the way this zombie's been mashed apart.
I really love the things that pop out. So like eyeball on a string, that's quite a good one. Whenever people see that, they're really impressed by it. The swinging jaw, I love. The sort of dangling guts that come out of the abdomen.
The beauty of all of this is in all of those like fantastic little details, you know, the way that the like intestines jiggle around when you like, you know, cut away the insides, and yeah, so it definitely takes a degree of dedication to really deliver on that, and I think we've done a really fantastic job of that.
The disgusting details had been realised, but for the true zombie dismemberment experience, the blows needed to be complemented with the sounds of visceral, blood-curdling gore.
It was definitely the first thing that we started on. Every weapon had a gore focus, whereas like if you do a sword hit or something in a fantasy game, you're angling the content towards this metal shing or this really powerful kind of maybe anime aesthetic on it. But for us, it was like, how bloody can this feel? How gross can this feel? How much damage am I doing at any one time? So it had to be part of the content from the very start. We kind of have to identify gore. We get really nerdy about it, especially in audio. We have piles of generic gore, but then we have blood gore and special gore and slasher gore and crunchy kind of gore. So once we've identified that, we'll kind of go into our Foley rooms and start ripping things apart, whether it's kind of wet matter like vegetables or something harder like walnuts.
As anyone with a passing interest in Foley will tell you, the source of these sounds can often be from something that you least expect.
So we have an enemy, and I don't think people anticipate where that comes from, because that originated from Christmas wrapping paper originally, because it gives you that kind of crinkly, crunching movement kind of sound. When you see it recorded, it looks very tame in comparison to what it really is. The scale of it was the real big challenge for audio, because we go so far with Flash, where it's not just like, oh, some blood decals fire out, it's different levels of viscera being physicalized and knocked off a human body. We spent about a week in audio just going, how long can we make blood splats be and get away with it? Because the longer the gore lasted, the worse it felt in the best possible way.
Perhaps Dead Island 2's most infamous kill at this point is the already iconic fist directly through the skull. The Kinder Eggman philosophy explained how this visually took place, but how was the sound created?
You kind of look at it first like a punch, and you kind of design a punch to kind of get that impact, and then you have all the crunchy content for the bone and stuff like that. So it's stuff like walnuts, breaking branches and things like that that's then distorted and pitched down, and then it's sync. Like, you have to have that grossness on the way in and the way out. And so there's like, I think there's a little bit of like a thunk as you pull out to kind of have that air pull kind of thing, which is, again, is really unrealistic, but it gives you that satisfaction. The really small things were always my favorite. So the fact that we do physicalized audio for the gore is great. So if someone's head comes off, you can kick it like a football and you will hear it go down the corridor, which is just a great bit of detail for us and makes it feel gross but satisfying in the same way.
As with every impressive moment in video games, the final result is the product of people working together. And we only touch the surface of all the individual contributions that combine to create such a gruesome and effective system.
It was so nice to be able to really feel like I could put everything that I love into this system.
We made a system where there's not a limit to how much you can destroy the zombies.
It's a huge potion, real mix of sort of all of these different ingredients, and it has been so tricky to get right, but we've learned a hell of a lot.
I am really proud that we've done things on this game that I don't think I've seen done elsewhere. It's a game about bashing zombies' heads in, and we've capitalised on spending a load of time and energy making bashing zombies' heads in really cool.
I thought I'd kind of, wasted my youth watching all these shitty movies, but as it turned out, it was all building to this moment.
To find out more about how things are made in video games, check out our concept controller on Dead Space or our episode on The Quarry. And for more on Dead Island 2, stick with IGN.